Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing our series of shirim on Rebbe Nachman's tale of the spider and the fly, the seventh tale in the Sipurei Maisios Meshanim Kadmonios, corresponding to the tikkun of the Emes, which is the seventh of the 13 attributes of mercy and compassion that HaKadosh Baruch Hu shines forth on Klal Yisrael, specifically when they recognize the undeservingness of it. Specifically, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks down to the Nakuda of Emes, the question is asked, how can Emes be one of the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim? If the truthfulness of the situation is that we're deserving of the opposite of rachamim, God forbid, or that mi omer shezachisi levavi, who can claim that they're deserving of rachamim? So zak the Kluja Gaver Rebbe Hashem Yimkom Domo, that the Kluja Gaver Goin, that the midah of emes is a midah of rachamim, because on the emes la'amiso level, in the innermost point of truth, when it comes to the nature of a person in that moment, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks and sees where the person truly stands, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees the goodness that burns at the heart of any external concealment, and he sees the ancient days that rests hidden within the shortened days of Zer Anpin. And the secret of Sipurei Maisios Meshanim Kadmonios, to wake a person up from their slumber, as Rebbe Nachman said, that we tell stories to wake ourselves up. What we're waking up is the innermost point, the nekuda of the Yechida Shabanefesh, that remains purified in spite of all things. And as Rav Hutner says, it's not ours to defile. It's not that we're so great that we haven't been able to lose sight of our greatness and we hold on to that point of greatness. No, Adarabba, we've lost ourselves 1,000 times. That point of greatness within ourselves is not ours to defile. It's hektish. It's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavechol. It's the Pintel Yid. It's the nekuda of Chelek Eloi Kamimah Mamish. And in that place, no matter what I try and do, I can't scrub it off. No matter what I try and do to run away from that place, it will always, always, always come back to be revealed. That Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, the panemius of Netzach Yisrael, which is the Nekuda panemius at the heart of every Yid, which is the ability to be menatzeach on all of the preventions, even the concealment of the tzimtzum itself, that will be revealed in the end, one way or the other. That Geula, with the arrival of Geula, Benkach Ubenkach, the revelation of that Nekuda panemius of Emes is going to be revealed. And so when HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks towards the innermost point of a Yid, at that point, wherever they find themselves, and we allow ourselves to believe in that innermost point, so we uncover Midav Rachamim Rabim, because on the level of Emes La'amiso, what's being revealed there is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us so much that we're never far from him, and that we're the crown of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's crown, and we're the jewel of his crown, and we're the innermost point of the Pnimius HaRatzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that somehow, some way, through the radical secrets of Tzimtzum and the Binyan Beis HaMikdash, which is Tzimtzum, and creation of the world, which is Tzimtzum, and the Bechira of Klal Yisrael, which is Tzimtzum, and the giving of the Torah, which is Tzimtzum, all of these things have enabled it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us, Nishmas Yisrael, Binyan Beis HaMikdash, as much as anything, even more, Chavyachol, than he loves himself, as Rebbe Nachman points out. And we become the crowning jewel. The ani of each and every Yid becomes the crowning jewel, and seen through the perspective of the Emes La'amiso, of the Midah of Emes. So we're going to see how no matter where a person finds themselves, they're connected mechuber to the innermost place of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the innermost point of his kashrus pnimius, and that innermost point of the heart, which is boyer ad ein sof. And so the midah of emes is megalazayin. It reveals that in spite of appearances, of disorientation, in spite of appearances of the opposite of truth, in spite of the appearance of the opposite of a pure alignment with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ratzon and hashkacha in this world, and the acknowledgement that Eina and Movado, in spite of the fact that there's so many external things that seem to point to the fact that that's torn asunder and no longer ours to grasp, the tikkun of the emes comes to reveal that in truth there's a depth of emes la'amiso that's magala, the yichud, the unity that exists at the heart of all separation. And that's really going to be what this story is about, because the story of the spider and the fly is ultimately going to be about the encounter of the spider and the fly, and the desire of the spider to overtake the fly, and the fly's ability to outrun the spider, as we're going to see. But ultimately, this natural pagisha, the fact that when we're looking at the beginning of a story, we see that it's a ma'isa me'achabish v'zvuv, it's a story of a spider and a fly, we already realize that there are two sides of something. There's two sides here. There's not just the spider and there's not just the fly. There's not the spider and the fly on one side, but there's a spider and there is a fly. There are two ways in which reality is going to be grasped. And again, everything that we learn about in Sipurei Maisios can be reflected too within the self and in interpersonal relationships. The one prerequisite necessary is that everything that we're saying is b'derech dimyon, is b'derech a potential interpretation of the dream. And if the dream is a right interpretation and it's interpreted properly, then let those words illuminate. And if the words that are being said have nothing to do with what the chalom is, the chalom of the story is, then they should be disregarded. So Kolzman that we're holding on to to the fact that every attempt to understand Sipurei Maisios Meshanim Kadmonios is at best an estimation, and therein lies the secret redemptive nature of the narrative restructuring when I relinquish the desire for absolute control or absolute authorship, and I give way to the fact that there are multiple authors, multiple parts within me that are writing my life story. So then I open myself up to the possibility of not needing to necessarily be correct and living within the imaginative process of turning my own life into a Sipurei Maisios. And so we encounter the Maisa Me'achabesh V'zuv, the spider and the fly. And in truth, the splitness of this encounter between the spider and the fly, and the reason that we are already thrown into a place by the title itself of the story between an encounter or showdown between two oppositional sides, is because, as the Talmidim point out, that this story, Maisa Me'zvuv V'achabesh, Me'achabesh V'zuv, the spider and the fly, is in truth a story that Rebbe Nachman was telling about himself. It was a story that Rebbe Nachman was telling about himself in terms of the machlokas and the redifa and the chasteness that he himself experienced. That in Rebbe Nachman's life, Tzaddik Yesod Olam, the Nachal Neveh Makor Chachma, he had a difficult life. And the spiritual development that he was understanding, that demanded difficulty. He was able to point that out immediately. That because Rabbi Nachman was paving paths for the future generations to be able to traverse that territory of spirituality. So every single thing that Rabbi Nachman had to do, like all of the Yechidei Hadoros, like Moshe, like Rabbi Shimon, like the Arizal, like the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, like Rabbi Nachman, like our generation, everything that they had to do took immense amounts of effort in order to break free from the concealment. Why? Because the concealment tries to swallow up big things. The concealment tries to get rid of illumination that is going to give a strong push to Klal Yisrael to become better and to be choser b'tshuva. And the sitra achra and concealment and forgetfulness awaken in moments like that, and they try and create a distraction. They try and create an externalization of things, which can become what most people talk about and what distracts most people. And in truth, the only reason that that machlokas is taking place or that difficulty is taking place is just so that the goodness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is perpetually preparing takes place under the cover of tznius, and it takes place under the cover of modesty and secrecy. All external concealment is just so that we become stuck on the external concealment, so that that which is taking place in the innermost interiority of things can be done without prevention, until suddenly the externality, the walls are going to fall away, and it's going to be revealed that the light has been cultivating all along. Like Yehuda HaTzadik, who goes down into the places of exile, goes down into those murky territories of Tamura and Tamar, and that whole sugya of not knowing which way is up and which way is down, which is just revelatory of the nature of Rus and Boaz and the entire unfolding nature of Mashiach Tzidkenu. So we see that there's a sowing of the light of Mashiach, and Or Zarua L'Tzadik, that takes place undercover. It takes place away from the eye. It takes place away from human judgment. Externally, there's chaos. Externally, there's conflagration. Externally, there's a battle. Externally, there's a prevention. Externally, there's a point of concealment within the mind. But ultimately, what that concealment is just so that we can learn how to allow the real process that is taking place underneath to take place in the way that it needs to take place, and to realize that all external machlokas, all external concealment is not actual concealment, but rather it's concealment for the sake of allowing something more internal and interior to grow, and it could not develop itself unless it was covered over by the thick clouds of concealment that distract people on the outside. This is true when it comes to anything about the gilui of the tzaddikim amitim, the Torah of the tzaddikim, the life story of the tzaddikim, the unfolding process of the experience of the tzaddikim. Every element of their lives is a secret doubled way of looking at things, that externally things might appear to be chaotic and overwhelming, but internally there's a menuchas emesh she'atar otzeba, there's a singular line of vision, there's a singular line of connectivity which is perpetually focused on fixing, perpetually focused on redemption and cultivating the lights of redemption. And so when it comes to the machlokas of tzaddikim, when it comes to the story of the Maisa Me'achabesh V'zvuv, which Rebbe Nachman is reflecting on his own experience with machlokas, and we'll see soon that primarily it's the machlokas of Rebbe Nachman and the Shpola Zeidy that we're going to be spending so much time talking about, because this story is about the machlokas between the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman. And again, as Rav Yoelish of Satmar Zchus Yogen Aleinu said, and the Rebbe Ravitchemeyer Shlita, the Goyin and the Tzaddik Ravitchemeyer Shlita, heard this in the name of his Rebbe from London, who heard it in the name of Rav Yoelish Satmar, that when it comes to understanding the true nature of machlokas l'shem shamayim, of understanding what is the purest example of an argument, of a concealment, of a battle, of a war, of a tzimtzum, that is really only externally dark, but ultimately internally it's for the sake of bringing out a deeper way of looking at shalom, a deeper way of understanding HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light in this world, a deeper way of grasping the light, a deeper way of revealing Hashem in this place. So the Spitz example of Machlokas L'Shem Shamayim, yes, we understand Chazal say Shammai and Hillel, but the Satmarov, Rav Yodesh, said that it was the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman, which just means that it's an aspect of the Machlokas of Shammai and Hillel, because the entirety of the creation of the world is dependent upon the Machlokas of Shammai and Hillel, as the Megala Amukos points out, that Naaseh Adam, Naaseh is Rosh Tevos, Nimloch im Shammai Hillel, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided along with the neshamos of Cain and not Cain and Hevel, of Shammai and Hillel, which are also connected to Cain and Hevel, but those two neshamos were the motivating factor towards the creation of the world, because it's really the machlokas itself, the machlokas, the apparent separation, for the sake of revealing a das of shalom that could only be revealed through machlokas itself. That is what is needed for the creation of the world, in the same way that Tzimtzum operates. Because there's a machlokas between HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite light and the possibility of HaKadosh Baruch Hu limiting himself. And that machlokas is not going to be settled until there's going to be a das of shalom, which is the secret of tzimtzum. And the secret of tzimtzum is the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is there and is not there at the same time. Avada, it's there. But Avada, there's also a way of Hashem enabling us to see it as if it's not there, because that's necessary for us to exist, as Rebbe Nachman describes in Torah Samach Dalet about tzimtzum. That the yishuv to the machlokas between the infinite light of Or Ein Sof Kavyachol and the Bria Sa'ilamos of Atam Chadmon and Atzilas and Bria and Yitzira, and the possibility of individualism and the possibility of separation, that machlokas is settled through the secret of tzimtzum, as Rebbe Nachman describes there, that kol yamai gadalti bein hachachamim v'loy matzati guf toiva el shtika, that all of my days I have grown in between the chachamim, and I have found that the only way to function there properly is silence. So Rebbe Nachman points out that it's within the machlokas between the light and the vessel, between the infinitude of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the finite expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. That's where the light is going to emerge. It's mibein shnei hakruvim. The light of Mashiach Tzidkenu comes from within the crevices that are revealed through the secret of machlokas. But it's specifically in recognizing that the way to function in a place of machlokas, the way to function in that empty space between the two sides, in the Chalal HaPanui, is by way of shtika. By way of an inner speech, by way of a silencing and an entering into a place of shtoik kach Allah b'machshava, entering into the shtika kahoida of recognizing, just as Moshe Rabbeinu was forced to recognize, as Rebbe Nachman points out when it came to the Misa Mishun of Rabbi Akiva, that shtoik kach Allah b'machshava, that if you want to enter into the place of Allah b'machshava, of Keser Elyon, Allah Nikra, which is the yichud of any machlokas, because all machlokas ultimately, as we're going to see, is a machlokas between chachma and bina. All machlokas is a chachma and bina conversation. The infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is considered as chachma relative to bina, and bina is the vessels. Everything, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, Shabbos, the 6 days of the week, Torah, Tefillah, all of the different, the Kav Yamin, the Kav Smol, it's all ultimately a machlokas between chachma and bina. And it's only in Keser that we see how Chachma and Bina, that machlokas, is ultimately working together to reveal a higher light. And that is the place of shtika. So shtoik kach Allah b'machshava, that if you identify with the koyach of shtika, which is patience and bittul, and emuna yisera in the tzaddikim, without any attempt to judge what may have actually been taking place, without claiming any knowledge of anything whatsoever, but rather operating within the full space of the hava mina, of trying to understand what takes place when two tzaddikim, especially a tzaddik of the caliber of the Shpola Zeidy with Rebbe Nachman, Zchus Yogan Aleinu, it behooves us to be silent, to enter into a place of faith, of kach Allah b'machshava, with the fundamental belief that from within this conflict, from within this encounter between Rebbe Nachman and the Shpola Zeidy, between the chachma and the bina, between the spider and the fly, between all of the ways that machlokas is expressed, we're going to come to find the das shel shalom, that singular pillar of faith and shalom that emerges from the place of keser, but only when machlokas is properly understood. Chas v'shalom, if a person takes machlokas of the tzaddikim at first glance on a level of chitzonius, so then what a person has done is they've been magshim the entire sugya, and they've applied human limitation and human conception into the nature of the tzaddikei yesod olam, whose entire lives were mushrash in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. We're speaking about the Yechidei Hadoros. We're speaking about the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. It's just as the Gra pointed out, And Rav Chaim Volozhiner writes in his Hakdama to his Rebbe's Parish on Safed Tzniusa, in terms of the apparent machlokas, or seemingly machlokas between the Gra and the Arizal, in the few places that there appears to be a deviation in terms of understanding. So Rav Chaim Volozhiner says the only thing to do is to stand back aside and watch. It's like what happens when Yehuda and Yosef encounter one another, and all of the other Shvatim stand back in the silent awe of recognizing that something tremendous is taking place here. And now, when we talk about the life of Rebbe Nachman, I can't speak about any other machlokas other than the machlokim of the tzaddikim, that the tzaddikim are machshir. But in this machlokas, when it comes to the neshama of Rebbe Nachman, it's impossible that there's anything that is not fundamentally purposeful, and the purpose of the purpose is revealed. And this machlokas between the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman, which, as Rav Yeilish points out, is the spitz example of the machlokas l'shem shamayim, to be megala a new shamayim, to be megala a new place of shalom. It's going to be found in the relationship between the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman Zchus Yagan Aleinu. The Rebbe Shlita wrote, and he said over in Purim Tafshin Samach Vav, that ultimately the machlokas between the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman is the taba'as, is the engagement ring upon which the chuppah of Mashiach Tzidkenu is going to be revealed. Meaning to say that this machlokas, the encounter between the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman, between the Chachma and the Bina, between these two ways of experiencing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's reality, and these two ways of grasping the light, which are going to be revealed in the story of the spider and the fly, and the basis of the narrative of the story of the spider and the fly, that this machlokas is the taba'as hanisuin. This is the ring, this is going to be the jewelry, the kishut that is going to come about from this machlokas, from this apparent concealment, which was such a darkened experience externally, but in truth there was a light being sown underneath in a way that is only shaykh to being revealed in the days of the future. So the preparation to try and understand this Maisa, the preparation to try and understand the shirish of shalom that existed between a tzaddik of the caliber of the Shpola Zeidy, somebody who saw the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, a tzaddik who had the capacity to put HaKadosh Baruch Hu on trial, Kaviyachol, a tzaddik who had the ability to bring about a Matan Torah again, something that Rebbe Nachman only tried to do, a tzaddik who was able to be Megala Nisim Nigloyim, a level of moifsim of tzaddikim from generations before. Secret of the Shpola Zeidy, a tzaddik of the Shpola Zeidy's caliber, and the secret of Nachal Nevei Mokar Chachma, Rebbe Nachman ben Fegas Chus Yagan Aleinu. An encounter of these two worlds is only a preparatory stage of revealing the innermost point of the unity that emerges from between the two of them, the truest form of machlokas l'shem shamayim. And that's where the taba'as hanisuyin comes from. Because what's a taba'as hanisuyin? The taba'as, the ring, as the Tikkun Zohar points out, is a circle within a square. The circle within the square. And the circle within the square is fundamentally rooted in the secret of the yichud of Chachma and Bina, the yichud of the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman. And the nisuyin is also the secret of the chibur between galus and geula, between any yichud of opposites. There's going to be that taba'as hanisuyin, which is going to become the ma'avar, that place where the transition from one stage to another stage takes place, and it enables us to see the das of shalom that exists. Just as Rebbe Nachman describes in terms of the tzimtzum, the chalal hapanui, and the or ein sof, that there's the way to be ma'avar, to jump beyond it, to be an ivri, to tap into a place of amuna and shtika, which enables us to make a shalom out of that machlokas. And so to try and understand the beginning nature of understanding what we don't understand in terms of the story of the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman, we prepare ourselves in the hopes that uncovering the yichud between these two tzaddikim, between a tzaddik of the caliber of the Shpola Zeidy and the yichidei hadoris, the Nachal Nevei Mokar Chachma, chidush kamonu lo hayom me'olam, Rebbe Nachman ben Fegas Chus Yagan Aleinu. Rebbe Nachman said already that la'asid lavo in the future, yeschok no'eh im osa zaken, yeschok no'eh mizeh, that there's going to be a tremendous laughter that emerges in the future from this story of the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman, from within this conflict of the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman, this global, this fundamentally significant encounter between these two tzaddikim, and the apparent machlokas on the outside that was simply there to enable for there to be a burgeoning light and yichud on the inside. that there's going to be a schloik, and we know that schloik, laughter, is the light of redemption that comes about specifically when separation and concealment and darkness and whatever it is and whatever synonym we're working with is transformed suddenly to be revealed to be the very opposite of what we assumed it to be, and it's going to be a revelation of Samchenu Ki Moisanisanu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals how every moment of concealment was ultimately a preparatory stage for a furthering of a revelation. And the chiddush is that we get to talk about this prior to the actual revelation of this, which is the secret of the schloik, which is the grin of the tzaddikim, which is always of a tislach liyom acharon, and not yet laughing, but a grin and a smirk in the fact that they're announcing that they're going to be laughing. So we know they're going to laugh in the future, but the future has not yet arrived for them to laugh. And their certainty of laughter that will be revealed in the future as a result of their einayim, the einay HaKadosh of the tzaddikim, we see the grin of the tzaddik, we see the chiyuch of the tzaddik. It's the desire to laugh, yet the inability to laugh. And from that chiyuch, from that smile of the tzaddik, so a person has the ability of drawing down the laughter of the last days into the present moment itself. The Vatischak Liyom Acharon, that Vav HaChibor of Vatischak Liyom Acharon draws it in. That Vav HaChibor draws it into the time where even we don't see that laughter, like Rabbi Akiva, who saw Churban. He only saw Churban and he started laughing, and it was besimcha because he already saw the Geula, because Misha Ma'amin, if you believe, Sheyicholim Lekalkel, Ta'amin Sheyicholim Letaken. If you believe that you can destroy, then believe that you can fix. And within the very destruction is the laughter of the eventual revelation of the fixing. And in spite of the fact that the tzaddikim don't have permission to reveal the laughter outright, we do have the ability to intuit from their grins and their smiles the secret of a tislak yom acharon. So when Rebbe Nachman says there's going to be a schleik na'eh from this, there's going to be a wondrous laughter, we already know that we have to reevaluate every way that we look at these things. And if these things have brought us to a place of the opposite of laughter, or judgment upon one tzaddik, or negative language, or the assumption that this is kipshuto chas v'shalom, so then we are not enjoining ourselves to benefit from that secret drop of Gan Eden that descends down into our consciousness by way of the anticipatory secret of the laugh of the tzaddikim. We know that the tzaddikim are going to laugh. We know Hashem is going to laugh. We know we're going to laugh. We know there's going to be a Suda of Lav Yasan. We know there's going to be Elu Toldos Yitzchak, Elu Toldos Aschayk. We know that there's going to be a Mahapecha Gedoyla, where every ounce of Chayshach is Nisapech into a Kli to be Magala Zayin on the Or HaOyres of Mufla Romala. We know that already. We know the secret of a Tislach Liyom Acharon. We know it. We know Purim. We know that there's an Aduliyada. But even though we don't see it, by knowing it, we can draw it down into our consciousness and we can redeem ourselves. We can laugh, 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 fall apart. We can crack ourselves up. We can break apart into a million pieces and let go of the previously held certainties that kept us stuck. And we can open ourselves up to the possibility of imagination and to the possibility of growth by way of joy rather than by way of sadness and despair. Like Rabbi Akiva teaches us of shtoik kach ala b'machshava, be silent, laugh silently. You can't laugh yet, laugh in your mind. But draw that laughter of the schleik na'ah that's going to be revealed from the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman, the yichudim niflaim and the zivugim and the tzirufim chadashim that are oile from every ounce of this encounter, and we can draw it down into our lives and we can laugh about it. We can open up our lives. We can open up the concealment, like the Baal Tanya teaches us that a tefach soichik, a laughing tefach, is when there's a revach ben hadvekim, when there's a space between the fingers, unlike a tefach oitzev, which is a closed hand, which represents the fact that laughter is always an openness to allow my mind to be changed from the position that I found myself in right now. The ability, the opposite of what Kamsa and Bar Kamsa were stuck in, the rigidity of the mind, the unwillingness to bend the mind. Over here, we're reorienting our mind. Siproi maisios meshanim kanmonios come to reveal to us that our waking consciousness has the capacity of becoming a dream, because what I thought were the rules of reality are suddenly transformed to be the opposite, and I come to realize that I can function differently in the narrative structuring of my life. That opens up for a person the ability to laugh, 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 fall apart, to not take themselves so seriously. And when we can do that with our approach to the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman, and we can draw from that laughter of the future into the sadness and the tears of the present and into the machlokas of the present, we'll be able to open up pockets of laughter and build a teva within the flood itself. Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman, the Dor Revi Asher Yashuvu Hena, fourth generation from Rebbe Nachman, and Rebbe Nosson, and Rebbe Nosson's Talmud Mufak, Rav Nachman Tolchiner, and Rav Nachman Tolchiner's son, Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman, who was a tzaddik Yisrael Olam, wrote the Bir Halikutim, wrote Chachma V'Tfuna, Ansipuri Maisios, wrote Kochvei Or, wrote Chachma and Bina, someone who gave us everything that we need in order to draw down the light of Rebbe Nachman and Rebbe Nosson to the moichin that we need in terms of where we find ourselves right here, right now. As I said once before, I walked into the Rebbe's office once holding a Bir Halikutim, and the Rebbe asked me if it was mine, and I said yes, and he said there's no other way to learn the Kutim Aran other than the Bir Halikutim, because we know that the Bir Halikutim and the Chai Klalim and the living with the Torah, as Rav Nachman Fried is revealing so very clearly in his beautiful program of learning the daily Torah, the weekly Torah, the monthly Torah of Rebbe Nachman, and to follow it inside with the klalim of Minei Ubei, with the deep belief that everything a person possibly needs is going to be found within the Torah in front of them at that moment. And it's that light of Rav Avram and Rav Nachman that's going to lead us into our next stage of understanding this story of the tzaddikim, of the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman. Because ultimately, what Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman brings to mind is the fact that this story has everything to do not only with the machlokas between the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman, but it has everything to do with a statement that Rebbe Nachman made, which said as follows: that Rebbe Nachman said at the end of Torah Chaf Hey that Chazal gave 7 names to the Yetzer Hara. Chazal gave 7 names to the Yetzer Hara, and he said, I now want to reveal an 8th name of the Yetzer Hara. And the 8th name of the Yetzer Hara that I want to reveal, says Rebbe Nachman, is Koyach HaMedama, imagination, the imaginative principle within the mind. That's what I want to refer to as the Yetzer Hara. And what Rav Avram ben Rav Nachman reveals is that by Rebbe Nachman revealing that, he was revealing that it's the essence of imagination that has the susceptibility of falling prey to the Yetzer Hara, but it's also the essence of imagination, which is going to be the site in which we uncover the way to rectify the Yetzer Hara. That Rebbe Nachman calling the Yetzer Hara by an 8th name, almost like Yaakov Avinu asking the Malach HaMaves and asking the Yetzer Hara what its name was, to understand its true name, not the 7 names of expression of the way the Yetzer Hara expresses itself, but the essence of the Yetzer Hara itself, to understand how it can be transformed and utilized in Avodas Hashem. That was what Rebbe Nachman was engaged in when he was naming it an 8th name, revealing the potency of the medama, of imagination. And as I understand it, and there's so much to talk about mamish, but as I understand it, that this machlokas between the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman, between the spider and the fly, is ultimately going to be a conversation, the machlokas, between intellect, between simplicity, between chachma, between knowing things in a simple, clear way and operating in accordance with the rigidity and the refinement that is necessary there, which has always been the path of finding a Kadosh Baruch Hu, the path of chachma, and the path of Dimyon, which is going to be more associated with the path of Bina and Rebbe Nachman, which is going to be the allowance of the wisdom of the mind to give way to the feelings of the heart and the imaginings of the heart, in order to bring Avodas Hashem into a place that's even higher than the original Chachma. So in our way of understanding, the Shpola Zeidy, who's going to be the spider that's trying to swallow the fly, that represents Chachma, that represents the Seichel, that represents wisdom in its precision, das of Torah, without falling prey into the imaginings of the heart and the emotionality and the vulnerability of the world of Bina, and the midos and their separation, etc., etc. The zvuv, which is going to be Rebbe Nachman in this story, the fly, which is so often identified as something negative, but over here we're showing how what Rebbe Nachman wanted to do was to take the negative and sweeten it and reveal that it's only through this thing that we'll be able to reveal the highest light of Chachma itself. Rebbe Nachman is the zvuv, which is running away from the spider. That's bina, that's imagination, that's the possibility of extending my mind beyond what I know with certainty, descending down into the heart, into the midos, into those potential places of concealment, in the hopes of coming back up to reveal an even greater light, which is what the Shpola Zeidy understood Rebbe Nachman to be doing, but externally, the descent that Rebbe Nachman was going into imagination was something that the Shpola Zeidy, tzaddik who's associated deeply with Chachma, was unable to handle externally, because Chachma is terrified when Bina goes down into concealment, as we're going to discuss. But ultimately, Bepnimius, as we're going to see, the entire tachlis of Rebbe Nachman going down into that place of Bina is because Neshami Chit Nishmasi Pelagadol is because Rebbe Nachman's neshama is a neshama that's so halig that it's willing to go down from a place of the simple unity of Chachma into the concealment of Bina, only in order to come back up again and reveal that the tachlis all along has been Chachma, but now when Bina comes back up into Chachma, it reveals something even more within Chachma that Chachma couldn't reveal within itself had Bina not descended down and come back up with concealment. That the whole tachlis of the Yerida is to move down from Chachma in order to operate in a way that seems to be the opposite of Chachma, in a state of imagination, and then to bring imagination back up into Chachma and to allow imagination to cause a re-inauguration of Chachma to reveal its true power, which is the highest level, which is Pnimius of Chachma, the innermost point of Chachma, which is the place that leads us back to Keser, back to Reshad Lois Yada, back to the unity of Chachma and Bina itself, which is where the unity of the Shpola Zeidy and Rebbe Nachman are going to come out. And so I know that I'm saying a lot, and by no means am I trying to claim any element of authority on this. I've been trying to, bother the Rebbe and share some of these ideas with the Rebbe. I haven't been told to stop yet. So I haven't been told to stop yet, but that's what we're going to be basing ourselves on, Be'ezras Hashem. And this process, this yichud that we're going to be encountering, is going to be something that we're going to refer to as the yichud b'derech haka'a and the yichud b'derech batisha. The unity that's going to encounter, that's going to be revealed specifically by way of conflict. Very often there's a unity that takes place when something meets a smooth unity, where A merges with B and A and B connect together based on their separate needs, each one providing what the other needs, each one benefiting in a mutually dependent relationship. And then there's going to be another type of relationship, which is going to be a yichud b'derech haka'a, when things encounter a confliction between one another, where something doesn't meet between them and there's a moment of contact in order to push away from each other. It's a goring, it's an encounter by way of resistance, where A hits what appears to be negative A, and they bounce back off of each other, and through their hitting of each other, they retreat back to their place with more energy, only in order to kind of hit each other again, only to separate once again. And it's over and over, this yichud b'derech batisha, this oppositional unity that emerges specifically when the edge of opposites hit together to reveal the sparking of a unity that's going to be born from within that conflict. As we see in the world of Akudim, in the way that the Kalim are made. It's where one type of ore hits another type of ore, and in their conflict, they allow the Kli to emerge. And this is everything that we need to know when it comes to the Yichud of the Batisha, when it comes to these two tzaddikim. It's going to be an apparent conflict. It's an oppositional relationship. But nevertheless, every ounce of the opposition, which reveals itself externally as a machlokas, is in truth the secret of an inner opposition, which is taking place to reveal more and more of a unity in the secret of kol yamai hiskadalti bein hachachamim, in that secret of the tzimtzum, the secret of the machlokas, mi bein shnei hakruvim, which is where Mashiach Tzidkenu comes from. Moshe Rabbeinu comes from Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef. It's the apparent machlokas between Chutz La'aretz and Eretz Yisrael, and the yichud between the two of them, etc., etc. And to end, Rav Menachem Mendel of Shklov says, for this reason, to understand Yichud of Batisha, Batash is Rosh Tevos, Bitachon, Tova, and Simcha. It's only when we understand that every encounter that we see in this world, even those that appear to be so separate from one another, even though if they appear to be fighting one another, nevertheless, with the deep belief that it's a Yichud b'derech Batisha, then we're armed with the bitachon, the trust, the confidence, the tova, the goodness and the awareness of connectivity, and the simcha and the preparation towards chlok, that we know that even though there's an apparent conflict and a riv going on in reality, nevertheless, it's all for the sake of revealing a light that's going to come about afterwards, be'ezras Hashem.